Billionaire was traveling for a romantic weekend until his ex sat nearby with a child. Welcome to Secrets Narrated. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. When the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10 and share what you felt along the way. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with twists and hidden truths, make sure to follow Secrets Narrated so you don't miss the next one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy every detail. Julian Mercer adjusted his Patek Philippe watch as he stepped into the first-class cabin, his tailored charcoal suit fitting him like a second skin. At 39, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing. 6 luxury hotel chains across 3 continents, each property a testament to his relentless vision and impeccable taste. His dark hair, threaded with distinguished silver at the temples, was swept back perfectly. His steel blue eyes, sharp and calculating in boardrooms, held a weariness tonight that no amount of success could mask. Standing at 6'2" with an athletic build maintained through early morning runs and disciplined routine, Julian was the kind of man who turned heads without trying. He'd left Vanessa, his girlfriend of 4 months, at the airport 3 hours earlier. A last-minute crisis with the Miami property had kept him behind. She'd been understanding, as always. Too understanding, perhaps. Their relationship was easy, uncomplicated, built on mutual convenience rather than passion. It was exactly what he'd convinced himself he needed. Julian located his seat, 14A, the window. He preferred observing the world from a safe distance. As he settled in, storing his leather briefcase in the overhead compartment, he heard footsteps approaching. Someone was taking the seat beside him. He glanced up. The world stopped. Ivy Lawson stood in the aisle, a small child balanced on her hip, her carry-on bag sliding off her shoulder. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Ivy was exactly as he remembered, and completely different. Her chestnut hair, once long and wild, now fell in soft waves just past her shoulders. At 36, she'd grown into herself in a way that stole his breath. Her honey-brown eyes, always expressive, now held a depth that hadn't been there before. She wore a simple cream sweater and jeans. No makeup except a touch of something that made her lips look naturally pink. She'd never needed adornment. Her beauty was the kind that lived in the curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the light that came from somewhere deep inside. But it was the child that made Julian's heart stop. A little boy, maybe a year old, with dark curls and the most striking blue eyes Julian had ever seen. Eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Julian. Ivy's voice was quieter than he remembered, steadier somehow. Ivy. He stood instinctively, suddenly aware of how little space existed between them. This is your seat? She nodded, adjusting the child on her hip. The boy was studying Julian with that fearless curiosity only toddlers possess, one tiny hand gripping his mother's sweater. Here, let me. Julian reached for her bag, their fingers brushing for half a second. The contact sent electricity through him that 4 months with Vanessa had never produced. He stored her bag, his mind racing through calculations he didn't want to make. They sat. The child, his child, impossible no, squirmed in Ivy's lap, making small sounds that weren't quite words. His name is Theo, Ivy said softly, answering the question Julian hadn't asked. Theo. Theodore. Strong. Classic. He's beautiful. The words came out rougher than Julian intended. Thank you. The flight attendant appeared, breaking the moment, asking about drinks, snacks, if they needed anything for the little one. Ivy handled it with practiced ease, pulling out a sippy cup, a small stuffed elephant, crackers in a plastic container. Julian watched her hands, the same delicate hands he used to hold, now moving with maternal efficiency. No ring. He noticed that immediately. No ring. So, he said when the attendant moved away, where are you headed? Charleston. My sister's getting married this weekend. Ivy stroked Theo's hair absently. You? Same destination. Different reason. He paused. Vanessa's already there. We're meeting friends. Something flickered across Ivy's face, too quick to read. Vanessa, she repeated. That's nice. I hope you're happy. The words were sincere. That was what hurt most. We're comfortable, Julian said, then wondered why he'd chosen that particular word. Theo dropped his elephant. Julian caught it before it hit the floor, holding it out. The boy took it with both hands, then offered it back. A game. Julian's throat tightened. They flew in silence for a while. The kind of silence that exists between people who once knew every thought in each other's heads and now knew nothing at all. 2 years. It had been 2 years since they'd last spoken. 2 years since the relationship that had consumed 3 years of his life ended in a quiet, awful conversation where neither of them fought, because fighting would have meant they still cared enough to try. He'd loved her. God, he'd loved her in a way that terrified him. The kind of love that made him want to burn down everything he'd built just to start over with her. But love hadn't been enough. Timing had been wrong. He'd been building the Shanghai property, gone for months at a time. She'd wanted roots, stability, something he couldn't give while chasing the next deal. So they'd let go, and he'd convinced himself it was for the best. Now, with her sitting 18 inches away, with that child, Theo, babbling softly and grabbing at her necklace, Julian felt the foundation of that conviction cracking. How old is he? The question came out before he could stop it. Ivy went very still. 17 months. Julian did the math. 17 months, plus 9 months. 26 months ago. 26 months ago they'd still been together. Barely. They'd been breaking up and getting back together, caught in that awful cycle of trying to make something work that kept falling apart, but they'd still been together. His hands gripped the armrests. Ivy was watching him, her expression unreadable. Julian? Is he mine? The words hung in the recycled air between them. Ivy looked down at Theo, who had fallen asleep against her chest, his small hand curled into a fist near his mouth. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, or might have been anger, or might have been both. I think, she said quietly, that's a conversation for when we're not 30,000 feet in the air with 100 people around us. It wasn't a denial. Julian's heart was pounding so hard, he was certain she could hear it. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their descent into Charleston, asking everyone to return to their seats and prepare for landing. But Julian couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the impossible possibility that had just rewritten his entire world. Ivy adjusted Theo carefully, buckling him into the seat between them with a practiced efficiency that spoke of countless flights, countless moments Julian had missed. Moments he hadn't even known existed. After we land, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, we're going to talk. Yes, Ivy agreed. We are. The plane began its descent, and Julian Mercer, a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals, who had faced down investors and competitors without flinching, felt fear for the first time in years. Not fear of the answer, fear that he already knew it. Would you have told him? Or would you have kept the secret to protect everyone involved? The plane touched down with a gentle thud that felt like an earthquake in Julian's chest. Around them, passengers were already standing, reaching for overhead compartments, eager to begin their weekends. But Julian remained frozen in his seat, watching Ivy gather Theo's scattered toys with methodical precision. The elephant, a teething ring, a small board book with worn corners. She'd done this before, many times, without him. Ivy. His voice came out harder than he intended. She glanced at him, Theo still drowsy against her shoulder. Not here, Julian. Then where? She stood, adjusting the diaper bag that had materialized from somewhere beneath the seat. There's a family lounge near baggage claim. We can talk there. Julian rose, his height suddenly feeling like an advantage he didn't want. He pulled down her carry-on, his movements stiff with barely contained emotion. They deplaned in silence, Theo now awake and looking around with wide, curious eyes. Julian's eyes, taking in the terminal with the wonder of someone for whom airports were still magical. Julian's phone vibrated. Vanessa. Landed yet? I'm at the hotel. The suite is gorgeous. Can't wait to see you. XO. He stared at the message, his carefully constructed weekend crumbling with each step he took following Ivy through the crowd. He typed back, just landed. Delayed at airport. We'll explain later. Not a lie. Not quite the truth. The family lounge was quieter than the main terminal. Soft lighting, padded chairs, a small play area where a few toddlers were already exploring foam blocks and plastic slides. Ivy set Theo down, and he immediately toddled toward the toys with that unsteady gait of new walkers, his small hands reaching out for balance. Julian watched him, searching for himself in every gesture. Ivy sat in one of the chairs positioned to keep Theo in view. Julian took the seat across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched. For a long moment, neither spoke. He walks early, Julian said finally, watching Theo grab a red block. Started at 11 months. Ivy's voice was soft. He's stubborn. Once he decides he wants something, he doesn't stop until he gets it. Sounds familiar. She almost smiled. Almost. Julian, is he mine? He asked again, needing to hear it without the noise of the plane, without strangers nearby, without any excuse for ambiguity. Ivy met his eyes directly. She'd never been a coward. It was one of the things he'd loved most about her, her refusal to hide even when honesty hurt. Yes, the word detonated in his chest. Yes, he repeated, his voice hollow. And you didn't think I deserved to know? I was going to tell you. Ivy's hands clenched in her lap. I found out about 6 weeks after we broke up the last time. I was terrified, confused, but I was going to tell you. I had the whole speech planned. What stopped you? Her jaw tightened. I went to your office building. To surprise you. To tell you face to face because it felt too important for a phone call. But you weren't there. Your assistant said you'd left early, which you never did. Julian's stomach dropped because he knew. He already knew where this was going. I walked past Marcello's, that Italian place we used to go to. Ivy's voice remained steady, but her eyes had gone distant. You were in the window booth, with someone else. A blonde woman in a red dress. You were laughing at something she said, and then you kissed her. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Genevieve, a venture capitalist from London. 3 dates that had meant nothing, that had been his desperate attempt to prove to himself he could move on from Ivy. That was nothing. It was everything. Ivy cut him off, her voice quiet but sharp. Because it showed me you were already building a new life. You looked happy, Julian. Happier than you'd looked with me in months. And I was standing there, pregnant and alone, realizing that telling you would destroy whatever fresh start you were trying to make. That wasn't your choice to make. You're right. She didn't flinch. It wasn't, but I made it anyway. Theo dropped his block and looked over at them, sensing the tension. Ivy smiled at him, a smile that transformed her entire face, and he returned to his play, satisfied. Julian raked his hands through his hair, his carefully maintained composure shattering. 17 months, Ivy. I've missed 17 months of my son's life. I know. His first breath, his first smile, his first step, everything. I know. Her voice cracked slightly. Do you? Julian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Do you know what it's like to discover that everything you thought was true about your life is a lie? That while you were busy convincing yourself you'd made peace with losing the only woman you ever really loved, she was raising your child alone? Ivy's eyes widened. Julian, I looked for you, he said, the confession tearing out of him. 6 months after we ended things, I went to your apartment. You'd moved. No forwarding address. I called your number, disconnected. I even hired someone to find you, but you'd vanished. And I told myself it was for the best, that you'd clearly moved on, that I should do the same. But I never did. Not really. Her hand had moved to her mouth. I didn't know. Why would you? You'd already decided I didn't deserve to know the most important thing that ever happened to me. The words hung between them, brutal and true. Theo came toddling over, holding out a blue block to Ivy. She took it with trembling hands, pressing a kiss to his dark curls. When she looked at Julian again, tears were sliding down her cheeks. I was scared, she whispered. I was 34, pregnant, and terrified. You had your empire to build, your hotels, your investments, and I had a job teaching art history at a community college that barely covered my rent. What could I give a child? What could I give your child? Me, Julian said simply. You could have given him me. And ruined your life in the process? My life was already ruined the day you walked away. The admission seemed to stun them both. Theo, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment, climbed into Ivy's lap, clutching his elephant. She held him close, her tears falling into his hair. Julian watched them, his child, his ex-lover, the family he'd never known he had, and felt something inside him fundamentally shift. What's his full name? He asked quietly. Ivy looked up. Theodore James Lawson. Not Mercer. You weren't on the birth certificate. I didn't think I had the right. Julian absorbed that. Another wound in a growing collection. Does he know about me? He's 17 months old, Julian. He doesn't understand about fathers and absence yet. But yes, someday I plan to tell him. When he was old enough to understand. When I was brave enough to face you again. Looks like the universe had other plans. Looks like it did. Theo yawned, his small fist rubbing at his eyes. Ivy checked her watch. His nap time. I should get to my hotel. Where are you staying? The Harborview Inn. Nothing fancy. Julian pulled out his phone. I'm at the Charleston Grand. My hotel, 3 blocks away. Of course he was. Of course the universe would put them that close. Ivy. He waited until she looked at him. This isn't over. We're not done talking. I know. I want to see him. Really see him. Get to know him. Julian, you have Vanessa waiting. I don't care about Vanessa right now. The words came out too loud. A mother across the room glanced over disapprovingly. Julian lowered his voice. I just found out I have a son. Everything else is background noise. Ivy studied him for a long moment. That assessing look he remembered from 1,000 arguments and reconciliations. Then she reached into her diaper bag and pulled out her phone. Give me your number. Your current number. He recited it. She typed. His phone buzzed. It's Ivy. We should talk more tomorrow. When Theo's with my sister. He saved the contact immediately, staring at her name on his screen like it was something precious. They stood simultaneously. Theo was fully asleep now, his head heavy on Ivy's shoulder. He's beautiful, Julian said again because he couldn't stop saying it. You did an amazing job. We did an amazing job, Ivy corrected softly. Whether you were there or not, Julian, he's half you. That's been both the hardest and the most wonderful thing about raising him. They walked to baggage claim together, collected Ivy's single suitcase, and stood awkwardly near the taxi stand. Julian wanted to touch them both, his hand on Theo's back, his arm around Ivy's shoulders, some physical acknowledgement of this impossible reality. But he didn't have that right. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, Ivy agreed. She climbed into a taxi and Julian stood on the curb watching until the taillights disappeared into Charleston traffic. Then he pulled out his phone and looked at Vanessa's message again. Can't wait to see you. He typed, we need to talk. Then he deleted it. Then typed it again. Then called for his own car, his mind already racing ahead to a conversation he never anticipated having. A life that had just gotten infinitely more complicated, and a child who carried his eyes and his stubbornness and deserved so much more than a father who found out about him by accident on a commercial flight. As the car pulled away from the airport, Julian's reflection stared back at him from the window. A man who'd built empires but couldn't build a simple life, who'd gained everything and lost what mattered most. And tomorrow, he'd have to start figuring out how to fix it, if it could be fixed at all. The Charleston Grand rose 23 stories above the historic district, all glass and steel elegance that Julian had personally approved during its design phase 4 years ago. It was one of his favorites. Modern luxury wrapped in southern charm with a rooftop bar that overlooked the harbor and rooms decorated in soft grays and warm whites. He'd been proud of this property once. Now, stepping into the lobby felt like walking into a stranger's life. The concierge recognized him immediately. Mr. Mercer, welcome back. Ms. Hartley checked in earlier. She's in the Magnolia suite as requested. Shall I have your bag sent up? Give me 20 minutes, Julian said, his voice sounding distant even to himself. He didn't go upstairs. Instead, he found himself in the hotel bar, ordering a whiskey he didn't want, staring at his phone. Ivy's contact glowed on the screen. One message. Just her name, and a promise of tomorrow. Tomorrow felt impossibly far away. He had a son. The words didn't feel real yet. They sat in his mind like a foreign language he was still learning to translate. Theodore James Lawson, 17 months old, dark curls, blue eyes, a stubborn streak inherited honestly. His son. Julian downed the whiskey in one burning swallow. Another? The bartender asked. He shook his head. Alcohol wouldn't help. Nothing would help except time, and maybe not even that. The elevator ride to the 14th floor lasted an eternity, and no time at all. Vanessa opened the door before he could knock, her face lighting up in that uncomplicated way of hers. She was beautiful. Objectively, mathematically beautiful. Blonde hair in beach waves, green eyes, the kind of effortless elegance that came from good genes and better stylists. At 32, she was a senior marketing executive for a tech startup, brilliant and ambitious and exactly the kind of woman Julian's business associates approved of. She was everything that should have been right. Finally, she pulled him into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and felt like a cage. I was starting to think you'd missed the flight. What happened? Julian stepped back, putting distance between them. We need to talk. Her smile faltered. That's never a good opening line. No, he agreed. It's not. He moved to the window, looking out over Charleston's glittering harbor, buying himself seconds to figure out how to detonate his life with words. Julian, you're scaring me. Vanessa's voice had gone careful. He turned to face her. I ran into someone on the plane. Someone from my past. Okay. She drew out the word. An ex? My ex. The ex. Understanding flickered across her face. She'd heard about Ivy. Not much, because Julian didn't talk about her, but enough to know she'd mattered in a way other women hadn't. And? Vanessa's arms crossed defensively. And she wasn't alone. Julian forced the words out. She had a child with her, a son, 17 months old. Vanessa's expression didn't change for 3 full seconds. Then, why does that matter to us? Because he's mine. The silence that followed could have swallowed galaxies. Excuse me? Vanessa's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I have a son. I didn't know. She never told me. But I saw him, Vanessa. I looked at that child and I knew. Julian ran his hands through his hair, pacing. The timeline fits. Everything fits. And when I asked her, she confirmed it. Vanessa sank onto the edge of the bed. You have a child? Yes. With another woman? Yes. And you just found out. Tonight. An hour ago. In the middle of the flight, actually. She laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. Of course this is happening. She looked up at him. What does this mean for us? It was the question Julian had been asking himself since the moment Theo's blue eyes had met his own. I don't know, he said honestly, but I need to figure out what it means for me and my son first. Your son, Vanessa repeated. A child you've known about for all of 90 minutes has suddenly become your priority over the woman you've been dating for 4 months? He's my child, Vanessa. My blood. How can he not be the priority? Because he existed before me and you didn't know about him. Nothing has actually changed except information you suddenly have. Her voice was rising. We had plans, Julian. This weekend was supposed to be about us. About seeing if this, she gestured between them, could become something serious. Julian felt the truth of what she wasn't saying. This weekend had been a test. Vanessa had been auditioning for a permanent role in his life, and they both knew it. I can't think about that right now. Of course you can't. Vanessa stood, her composure cracking. Because she's back, the one who got away, and now she's gift-wrapped herself with a child to make sure you'll never really let go. That's not fair. Fair? Vanessa's laugh was harsh. You want to talk about fair? I've spent 4 months trying to get you to open up, to let me in, but you keep everything locked behind these walls you've built, and now I know why. Because you never stopped loving her. The accusation hung in the air. Julian wanted to deny it, wanted to say that Vanessa was wrong, that what he'd felt for Ivy was past tense, ancient history. But standing in this hotel room with the memory of Ivy's honey brown eyes still burning in his mind, with the image of their son sleeping against her shoulder, he couldn't lie. I didn't know I was still in love with her until I saw her again, he said quietly. Vanessa flinched as if he'd struck her. Well, at least you're honest. Vanessa? No. She held up a hand. Don't apologize. Don't try to soften it. You just told me you're in love with another woman. A woman who's the mother of your child. There's nothing left to say. She moved to the closet, pulling out her suitcase with jerky, angry movements. What are you doing? Leaving. Going home. This weekend is clearly over. You don't have to leave. I'll get another room. You already paid for this suite. I don't want your money, Julian. I don't want your guilt either. She was throwing clothes into the suitcase without folding them. I want someone who looks at me the way you clearly still look at her. And that's never going to be you. Julian watched her pack, guilt and relief warring in his chest. I'm sorry. So am I. She zipped the suitcase with more force than necessary. I actually thought we had a chance. Shows what I know. You deserve better than this. Than me. You're damn right I do. But her voice cracked on the last word. She rolled her suitcase to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Julian, I hope she's worth it. I hope she's worth blowing up your life over, because that's exactly what's about to happen. I know. Do you? Vanessa met his eyes. You're about to enter a custody battle with a woman you have no legal rights to. You're going to have to explain to everyone in your life why you suddenly have a toddler. Your business partners, your investors, the media. This is going to be messy and complicated and public in all the ways you hate. I don't care. You will. She opened the door. But maybe that's what love is. Caring about something more than you care about your own comfort. She left, the door closing with a soft click that felt like the end of a chapter Julian had barely started reading. He stood alone in the suite, the massive bed, the champagne bucket Vanessa had ordered, the rose petals scattered across the comforter in a romantic gesture that now felt absurd. His phone buzzed. A text from Ivy. Theo's asking about the man on the plane. He called you Blue Eyes. Just thought you'd want to know. And then a photo. Theo in pajamas, tiny things covered in cartoon elephants, holding his stuffed elephant, his hair still damp from a bath, smiling at the camera with Julian's exact smile. Julian's knees went weak. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo, and felt something inside him crack wide open. This was his son, his child, a piece of him walking around in the world calling him Blue Eyes, existing in a reality that Julian had missed 17 months of. He typed back, "Can I see him tomorrow? Both of you, please." The reply came quickly. "Yes, my sister's wedding isn't until evening. We could meet for breakfast. There's a cafe near my hotel. 9 a.m.? I'll be there at 8:45. Bring coffee. I'm exhausted. Deal." Julian set the phone down and looked around the empty suite. Vanessa was right. His life was about to become complicated in ways he couldn't predict. There would be legal issues, custody arrangements, explanations to family and colleagues who thought they knew him. But as he looked at Theo's photo again, those eyes, that smile, that piece of him he'd never known was missing, Julian realized something fundamental had shifted. For 17 years, he'd built an empire on calculated risks and careful planning. Every decision had been strategic, every move designed to maximize profit and minimize vulnerability. But Theo wasn't a business deal. Ivy wasn't a negotiation. This was messy, human, terrifying. This was real. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Julian Mercer was willing to burn down everything he'd carefully constructed for something that actually mattered. He just hoped he wasn't too late. Julian arrived at the cafe at 8:30, 15 minutes earlier than promised, carrying 2 large coffees and a bag of pastries he'd picked up from the hotel's bakery. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Theo's face, heard Ivy's voice saying yes, felt the weight of 17 missed months pressing against his chest. The cafe was a small corner place called Magnolia's, all exposed brick and mismatched furniture, the kind of spot tourists walked past without noticing but locals loved. Morning light filtered through large windows, catching dust motes in golden shafts. He chose a table near the back, away from the door, somewhere they could talk without the whole world listening. At 8:50, the door chimed. Ivy stepped inside, and Julian's breath caught the same way it had on the plane. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes look luminous. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup again, and she looked tired. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from raising a toddler alone. Theo was on her hip, wearing tiny jeans and a striped shirt, his dark curls wild despite obvious attempts to tame them. When he saw Julian, his face lit up with recognition. "Blue Eyes!" he shouted, pointing. Ivy's cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry. That's what he's been calling you since yesterday. I tried to teach him your name, but—" "I love it," Julian interrupted, his voice rough. "It's perfect." He stood as they approached, uncertain of the protocol. Did he hug her, shake her hand, touch his son? Ivy made the decision for him, settling Theo into a high chair the server brought over, then sitting across from Julian with the kind of careful distance that spoke volumes. "Coffee," he said, sliding one of the cups toward her. "Cream, no sugar, unless you've changed." "I haven't." She took a sip, closing her eyes briefly. "God, I needed this." He was up at 5:30. "Is that normal?" "For him, yes. For me, it's hell." She smiled slightly. "But you adjust." Julian watched Theo bang his palms on the high chair tray, making happy noises. "What does he eat for breakfast?" "Anything that isn't green. Scrambled eggs are usually a safe bet. Pancakes if I'm trying to earn favorite parent points." "You're the only parent," Julian said quietly. "You automatically win." Ivy's expression softened. For now. The server approached, and they ordered eggs and toast for Ivy, pancakes for Theo, nothing for Julian because his stomach was twisted in knots. When they were alone again, Ivy pulled out some small toys from her bag. Blocks, a rubber duck, things to keep Theo entertained. Julian watched her hands move with practiced efficiency, the muscle memory of 1,000 meals out with a small child. "You're good at this," he said. "I've had practice." "Alone." "Yes." She met his eyes. "Alone." The word sat between them like an accusation. "I want to know everything," Julian said. "Every detail I missed. I know I don't have the right to ask, but you have every right." Ivy took another sip of coffee. "He's your son, Julian. Biology doesn't care about timing or circumstances." "Then tell me, please." Ivy looked at Theo. who was now gnawing on the rubber duck. Where do you want me to start? The beginning. When you found out. She was quiet for a moment, arranging her thoughts. I took the test 6 weeks after we broke up. I was late, exhausted, emotional, but I thought it was stress. The breakup had been awful, even though we both pretended it was mutual. It wasn't mutual, Julian interrupted. At least not for me. It wasn't for me either, she admitted. But we were so broken by the end, Julian. We couldn't stop hurting each other. I thought distance would help. Did it? No. Then I saw those 2 pink lines and everything changed. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. I was terrified. I'd just moved back in with my sister temporarily because I couldn't afford rent alone. My job barely covered basics, and I was going to have a baby. Your baby. Julian's hands clenched under the table. You should have called me immediately. I almost did. Every day for a week I'd pick up the phone, but then I'd remember how tired you'd looked the last time we talked, how you'd said you needed to focus on the Singapore expansion, how you'd basically told me your work had to come first. That was never what I meant. I know that now. But at 24 weeks pregnant and hormonal, I convinced myself you'd see the baby as an obligation, a mistake, something that would trap you in a life you'd already walked away from. The food arrived. Ivy cut Theo's pancakes into tiny pieces, added a small amount of syrup, and placed them on his tray. He immediately grabbed a fistful and shoved it into his mouth, syrup running down his chin. Julian watched, mesmerized. He's not a neat eater, Ivy said apologetically. He's perfect. Wait until you have to clean syrup out of hair. It's a nightmare. But she was smiling as she wiped Theo's face with a napkin. Julian couldn't take his eyes off them. What was the pregnancy like? Horrible and wonderful. Ivy poked at her eggs without eating. Morning sickness until month 5. Back pain. Swollen ankles. But also, there were these moments where he'd kick and I'd put my hand on my stomach and feel him moving, and it was magic. Terrifying magic, but magic. I should have been there. Yes, she agreed simply. You should have. Tell me about the birth. Ivy's expression shifted, became distant. 18 hours of labor. My sister was with me the whole time. She held my hand, told me I could do it, coached my breathing. At 3:17 in the morning on June 2nd, Theodore James came into the world screaming like he was furious at the entire universe. Julian did the math. June 2nd. That's your father's birthday. I know. Ivy's voice was soft. I didn't plan it. But when I realized, it felt like a sign. Like maybe some part of you was there after all. His father had died when Julian was 12. Cancer. Fast and brutal and unfair. Julian rarely talked about him, but Ivy had known, she'd always known, how much that loss had shaped him. You remembered, he said, his throat tight. I remembered everything, Julian. Every story you told me. Every detail about your life. Just because we ended didn't mean I forgot. Theo threw a piece of pancake and it landed in Ivy's coffee. Theo, no, she scolded, gently fishing it out. We don't throw food. No, Theo repeated cheerfully, then threw another piece. Julian laughed, couldn't help it. The sound felt foreign, like he'd forgotten how. Ivy looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. What? He's stubborn. I told you. Gets it from you. When did he start talking? Around 13 months, early for boys. His first word was more. Ivy smiled at the memory. Not mama or dada, just more. Or very on brand for a Mercer. The casual use of his last name sent a jolt through Julian. Does he know? About last names, family, any of it? He's 17 months old. He barely understands that other people exist when he's not looking at them. Ivy paused. But I always planned to tell him about you. When he was older. When I was braver. And now you don't have to be brave. I'm here. Are you? Ivy's eyes searched his face. Yesterday you were on your way to a romantic weekend with your girlfriend. Today you're having breakfast with your secret child. What happens tomorrow, Julian? Next week? When you go back to your real life? This is my real life now. You say that now. I mean it. Julian leaned forward. I don't know how to be a father, Ivy. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I want to learn. I want to be there for every moment from now on. He looked at Theo, who was now rubbing syrup in his hair exactly as Ivy had predicted. I want everything I missed and everything that's coming. Ivy's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Julian, it's not that simple. Why not? Because we live in different worlds. You have hotels across 3 continents, private jets, board meetings in Tokyo and Paris. I teach night classes at a community college. and live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Charlotte with my sister. How exactly do you see this working? I'll figure it out. You can't just figure out being a parent like it's a business deal. I know that. Do you? Because right now you're running on emotion and shock and maybe guilt. But what happens when the reality sets in? When you realize that being a father means 3 a.m. diaper changes and tantrums in grocery stores and missing important meetings because your kid has a fever? Julian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. She flinched but didn't pull away. Then I miss the meetings, he said quietly. I've spent 17 years building an empire, Ivy. I have money, power, success, everything I thought I wanted. And none of it mattered yesterday when I saw my son for the first time. None of it. A tear slipped down her cheek. You hurt me, Julian. When we fell apart, it destroyed me. And I won't let Theo get caught in that same cycle. I'm not asking you to trust me, Julian said. Not yet. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm serious. Let me be his father. However that looks, whatever that takes. Theo chose that moment to grab Ivy's hand, leaving syrup fingerprints all over her skin. Mama, he said clearly, then looked at Julian. Blue eyes. His name is Julian, Ivy told Theo gently. Can you say Julian? Theo scrunched up his face in concentration. Close enough, Julian said, his voice breaking slightly. They sat there, the 3 of them around a sticky table in a small cafe. And for just a moment, Julian could see it. Not perfect, not simple, but possible. A family, his family, if he could convince Ivy to give him the chance. After breakfast, Ivy had to return to her hotel to get Theo ready for a nap. Julian walked them back, carrying the diaper bag without being asked, learning that fatherhood started with small things, holding doors, anticipating needs, being present. He usually sleeps for 2 hours, Ivy said as they reached the lobby of the Harborview Inn. It was modest compared to the Charleston Grand, but clean and cheerful, with potted plants and local artwork on the walls. Can I see you both after? Julian asked. Maybe we could go to the park or something if that's okay. Ivy studied him, clearly weighing something. My sister's rehearsal dinner is at 6. I need to be there by 5 to help, so we'd have from noon until 4:30. I'll take it. Julian, this doesn't mean— I know what it means, he interrupted gently. It means you're letting me spend time with my son. That's enough for now. She nodded slowly. There's a park 3 blocks from here, Waterfront Park. Meet us there at noon? I'll be there at 11:50. The corner of her mouth lifted. Some things never change. He watched them disappear into the elevator, Theo waving sticky fingers at him, Ivy's hand protective on their son's back, and felt the now familiar ache of missing something he'd only just found. Julian spent the next 2 hours making calls he'd been avoiding. First to his attorney. Michael, I need you to look into paternity rights in South Carolina. There was a pause. Julian, is there something you need to tell me? I have a son, 17 months old. Just found out yesterday. The mother never listed me on the birth certificate. I need to know my options. To Michael's credit, he didn't ask questions, just shifted into lawyer mode. This is complex. Without being on the birth certificate, you have no legal rights. You'll need to establish paternity, DNA test, court petition. If the mother cooperates, it's straightforward. If not, she's not going to fight me, Julian said, hoping it was true. Even cooperatively, these things take time. Months, potentially. And if she's been the sole caregiver, any custody arrangement will likely favor her primary custody with you getting visitation. Visitation. The word felt like a punch. What if I want more? Then you'll need to prove you can provide stability, consistency. Courts care about the child's best interests, not parental rights. A billionaire who travels constantly for work isn't ideal father material on paper. Then I'll make changes. Julian, whatever it takes, Michael. Start the paperwork. The second call was harder. His mother answered on the 3rd ring. Julian, darling, I wasn't expecting to hear from you until Monday. How's Charleston? Catherine Mercer was 72, sharp as ever, and had opinions about everything in Julian's life. She'd liked Vanessa. She'd loved the idea of grandchildren, but on her timeline, after marriage, after Julian turned 40, after everything was properly arranged. Mom, I need to tell you something. Her tone shifted immediately. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I have news. He took a breath. I have a son. Silence. Mom, I'm trying to decide if you're joking. Her voice was ice. I'm not. His name is Theodore. He's 17 months old. I just found out yesterday. Yesterday. She repeated the word like it was foreign. And the mother? Ivy. Another silence. Longer this time. Ivy Lawson. The art history teacher. The woman you dated for 3 years and then walked away from. We broke up mutually. Nothing about that breakup was mutual, Julian. You were miserable for months. I was relieved when you finally started seeing Vanessa. Someone more appropriate. Vanessa and I broke up last night. Of course you did. Catherine's sigh could have frozen oceans. Let me guess. You saw Ivy again? Discovered you have a child? And immediately destroyed your current relationship? It wasn't like that. It's always like that with you and her. She makes you reckless. Julian's jaw tightened. She makes me human. She makes you forget who you are, the responsibilities you have, the empire your father and I built for you to inherit and expand. Dad would have wanted me to know my son. Don't presume to know what your father would have wanted. But her voice cracked slightly. When can I meet him? The question caught Julian off guard. You want to meet him? He's my grandson, isn't he? Regardless of the circumstances, family is family. She paused. Though I have questions about why this woman kept his existence a secret for 17 months. It's complicated. It always is. Catherine's tone softened marginally. Bring them to dinner. Next week. Your brother should meet his nephew. I'll ask Ivy. You'll convince her, Catherine corrected. You're a Mercer. We don't ask. We negotiate. After they hung up, Julian stood in his hotel room, looking out at Charleston's skyline, feeling the weight of expectations pressing down. His mother was right about one thing. He had responsibilities. Companies depending on him. Investors trusting his judgment, properties across the world requiring his oversight. But he also had a son who didn't know him, and a woman who'd raised that son alone because Julian had been too focused on building an empire to notice what he was losing. At 11:45, he was waiting at Waterfront Park. Ivy arrived exactly at noon, pushing a stroller. Theo was freshly changed, wearing a different outfit, red shorts and a white t-shirt with a cartoon dog on it. He woke up early, Ivy explained. Couldn't wait to go to the park. Because of me? Julian asked hopefully. Because of the ducks. There are always ducks here. But when Theo saw Julian, he reached out his arms. Ju! Julian looked at Ivy for permission. Go ahead, she said softly. He lifted Theo from the stroller, and his son wrapped small arms around his neck, trusting and perfect. Julian had negotiated billion-dollar deals without his hands shaking, but holding his child made him tremble. They walked to the pond where ducks floated lazily in the afternoon sun. Theo pointed and squealed, trying to wiggle free to chase them. He's going to fall in, Ivy warned. I've got him. And he did. For the next 3 hours, Julian learned what it meant to be a father, chasing a toddler who had no fear, wiping dirt off small hands, explaining that ducks don't want to be hugged no matter how much Theo disagreed. Ivy watched from a bench, occasionally calling out warnings but mostly just observing. Around 3, Theo climbed into Julian's lap, exhausted, and fell asleep against his chest. Julian sat frozen, barely breathing, afraid to move and break the spell. Ivy joined them on the bench, silent. Thank you, Julian whispered. For what? This, him, everything. You're his father, Julian. You don't have to thank me for letting you be his father. I think I do, considering. She looked at him then, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. You're good with him. Natural. I didn't expect that. Neither did I. He likes you? The feeling is mutual. Ivy smiled, a real smile, and Julian saw the woman he'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. Still there. Still her. I talked to my lawyer this morning, he said carefully, about establishing paternity, getting my name on the birth certificate. Ivy stiffened. Already? I need legal rights, Ivy. Not to take him from you, but to protect him. To make sure I can make medical decisions if needed, to put him in my will, to control the situation, she finished. To be his father legally, not just biologically. She stood, pacing away from the bench. This is what I was afraid of. You swoop in with your lawyers and your money and suddenly I'm just… What? The woman who kept your son from you? That's not what I think. Then what do you think, Julian? Because from where I'm standing, you've known about Theo for 24 hours, and you're already involving attorneys. I'm protecting my rights and you have no rights. The words came out louder than she intended. A couple walking past glanced over. Ivy lowered her voice. You have no rights because you weren't there. I was there. For every sleepless night, every doctor's appointment, every moment of fear when he had a fever or wouldn't eat or cried for hours and I didn't know why. Where were you? You didn't tell me. Because I saw you moving on. I saw you happy without me and I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong choice, but it was mine to make. Theo stirred against Julian's chest, making a small sound of protest at the raised voices. Julian lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. I'm not trying to take him from you. I'm trying to be part of his life. Why is that so threatening? Because I know how this goes, Ivy said, her eyes bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. You make promises. You mean them, probably. But then work calls or Singapore needs you or some crisis happens and Theo becomes the obligation you fit in between meetings. And he deserves better than that. Better than a part-time father who shows up when it's convenient. I'm not that person anymore. Prove it. How? I don't know, Julian, but lawyers and court orders aren't the answer. If you want to be his father, really be his father, it has to be because you choose him every day, not because some legal document says you have to. Before Julian could respond, Ivy's phone rang. She glanced at it, then answered. Hey, Chloe. Wait, what? Are you serious? Her face went pale. How bad? Okay, I'm coming now. She ended the call, her hands shaking. What happened? Julian asked, standing carefully with Theo still asleep against him. My sister. She's in the hospital. She was setting up for the rehearsal dinner and a light fixture fell. They think her arm is broken. Is she okay? She's asking for me. Ivy was already moving toward the stroller, grabbing the diaper bag. The wedding is tomorrow. She's supposed to walk down the aisle and now… Go, Julian said. I'll take care of Theo. Ivy froze. What? You need to be with your sister. I'll watch him. Take him back to my hotel. Keep him safe until you're ready. Julian, you've known him for one day. He's my son. I can handle a few hours. Ivy looked at Theo, sleeping peacefully, then at Julian, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. Trust versus fear, necessity versus control. Please, Julian said. Let me help. She took a shaky breath. He needs a bottle at 5. Milk, not too cold. And he has a blanket, the blue one with stars. He can't sleep without it. And if he wakes up scared, you sing to him. Anything, he doesn't care. He just likes voices. Okay. And Julian, she looked at him with something that might have been hope or might have been terror. Please don't prove me right about you. Then she kissed Theo's forehead, handed Julian the diaper bag like she was handing over her heart, and ran toward the street to hail a cab. And Julian stood in Waterfront Park, holding his sleeping son, truly alone with him for the first time. No Ivy to guide him, no instructions beyond a few hurried sentences, just a father and his child. And the terrifying, exhilarating realization that this was exactly the test Ivy had demanded. Now he just had to pass it. Theo woke up 20 minutes after Ivy left. Julian was sitting in his hotel suite, his son still cradled against his chest, when those blue eyes, his eyes, opened and immediately filled with confusion. Mama? Theo's voice was small, uncertain. Mama had to help Aunt Chloe, Julian said, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was racing. But I'm here. We're going to have fun together, okay? Theo's bottom lip trembled. Julian recognized the signs. He was about to cry. Hey, Julian said quickly, standing and bouncing slightly the way he'd seen Ivy do. Want to see something cool? This hotel has really big windows. He carried Theo to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Charleston Harbor. The afternoon sun sparkled on the water, and boats drifted by like toys. Look, Julian pointed. Boats. Big boats and little boats. Theo pressed his hands against the glass, the tears forgotten. Boat. That's right, boats. Julian felt a small surge of victory. For the next hour, they explored the suite. Julian let Theo open drawers, empty ones, nothing dangerous, and pull pillows off the couch and discover that his voice echoed in the marble bathroom. Ju, Theo shouted, delighted by the sound bouncing back. That's me, Julian confirmed, his chest warm. At 5 o'clock, he remembered the bottle. Milk, not too cold. He called room service. I need whole milk, not from the restaurant, fresh, cold, but not too cold in a bottle if you have one. Sir, we don't typically. I'll pay whatever it costs. My son needs it. 15 minutes later, a confused bellhop delivered a bottle of whole milk and an actual baby bottle the concierge had apparently procured from somewhere. Julian tested the temperature on his wrist the way he'd seen in movies, then offered it to Theo. His son took it without protest, settling into Julian's lap, his small body relaxing as he drank. Julian looked down at the dark curls, the way Theo's free hand clutched the elephant, the absolute trust in every line of his small body. This was his child, his responsibility, his privilege. The magnitude of it stole his breath. By 6:30, Theo was getting fussy. Julian checked his diaper, dry, thank God, and offered crackers from the emergency supply Ivy had packed. Theo threw them on the floor. Not hungry? Julian asked. No, Theo shouted, which seemed to be his favorite word. Okay. What do you want? Theo pointed at the TV. Julian turned it on, flipped through channels until he found a cartoon with bright colors and singing animals. Theo watched for approximately 3 minutes before getting bored and climbing off the couch. Right, Julian muttered. Attention span of a goldfish. They played with blocks. Then the elephant. Then Julian's watch, which Theo found endlessly fascinating. At 7:15, Julian's phone rang. Ivy. How is he? She sounded exhausted. Perfect. We're doing great. How's your sister? Broken radius, clean break. They set it and casted her. She's devastated about the wedding, but she'll be okay. Ivy paused. Is he really okay? He didn't cry? He asked for you when he woke up, but I distracted him with boats. We've had milk, crackers. Well, he threw the crackers, but I tried. He's currently trying to eat my watch. Ivy laughed, and the sound made something in Julian's chest loosen. That sounds about right. When can you come get him? That's the thing. Her voice changed. Chloe's asking me to stay the night at the hospital. She's on pain medication and freaking out about the wedding tomorrow. I should be here. Then stay. But Theo can stay with me, Julian finished. I'll keep him overnight. We'll be fine. The silence stretched so long Julian thought the call had dropped. Ivy, you've never done overnight with a toddler, she said finally. It's not the same as a few hours. He wakes up at night sometimes. He needs his routine. His blanket. Do you have his blanket? Julian looked at the diaper bag. The blue one with stars, right? Got it. And he needs his bath before bed, but not too hot. And watch his head because he hates water in his eyes. Ivy, Julian interrupted gently. I've got this. Trust me. That's asking a lot. I know. He watched Theo, who had abandoned the watch and was now trying to climb into the minibar. But I'm asking anyway. He heard her take a shaky breath. Bedtime is 8. He needs to wind down first. No TV, no rough play. Read him a book. Any book. He just likes the routine. Then bath, then bottle, then bed with his blanket and elephant. Julian grabbed a hotel notepad, scribbling everything down. Read, bath, bottle, bed. Got it. And Julian, if anything happens, anything at all, I'll call you immediately, I promise. After they hung up, Julian looked at Theo, who had somehow gotten the minibar open and was reaching for a tiny bottle of whiskey. Absolutely not, Julian said, swooping in to rescue the alcohol. Let's establish some ground rules. Bath time was an adventure. Theo loved the water but hated soap. He splashed until Julian's shirt was soaked and the bathroom floor was flooded, but he also laughed. Deep belly laughs that made Julian laugh too. You're trouble, Julian told him, wrapping him in a hotel towel that was too big. Just like your mom said. Mama, Theo agreed, suddenly serious. We'll see Mama tomorrow, Julian promised. The hotel didn't have children's books, but Julian found a magazine about architecture in the nightstand. He sat on the bed with Theo in his lap and read about sustainable building materials in a dramatic voice that made absolutely no sense. Theo didn't care. He turned pages, pointed at pictures, and yawned. At 8:15, Julian made another bottle, getting better at the temperature now, and dimmed the lights. Theo drank slowly, his eyes drooping. Julian had never held anything so precious. Not a signed contract worth millions, not the deed to his first property. Nothing compared to the weight of his son falling asleep in his arms. He stood carefully, placed Theo in the center of the king-sized bed, and built a fortress of pillows around him so he couldn't roll off. The blue blanket with stars went over him, the elephant tucked under his arm. Julian sat on the edge of the bed watching Theo's chest rise and fall. His son. His phone buzzed. A text from Ivy. Did he go down okay? Julian took a photo. Theo sleeping peacefully, the blanket tucked just right, and sent it back. Perfect angel. You raised an amazing kid. Her response came quickly. We raised an amazing kid. You're part of him, Julian. Always were. He stared at that message for a long time. At 10, his own phone rang. His brother, Christopher. Mom called. Chris said without preamble. You have a secret kid? Not secret, just newly discovered. That's a hell of a way to find out you're an uncle. But Chris didn't sound angry, just curious. What's he like? Julian glanced at Theo, still sleeping. Stubborn, loud, messy, absolutely perfect. Sounds like a Mercer. Chris paused. You okay? This is a lot to process. I'm terrified, Julian admitted. I have no idea what I'm doing. But Chris, when I look at him, everything else just disappears. All the things I thought mattered don't. Only he matters. That's called being a father. Is it always this intense? According to Dad's old journals? Yes. He wrote about feeling the same way when we were born, like his whole world had reorganized itself around these tiny humans he was responsible for. Julian hadn't known his father kept journals. Mom has those? She gave me Dad's when Emma was born. Said I'd need them. Christopher's daughter was 5 now, precocious and brilliant. You should read them. Might help. Maybe I will. They talked for another 20 minutes about custody arrangements, about introducing Theo to the family, about how to navigate co-parenting with someone you used to love. Used to love? Julian wasn't sure that was accurate anymore. At midnight, Theo woke up crying. Julian jerked awake from where he'd dozed off in the chair, immediately moving to the bed. Hey, buddy. I'm here. He picked Theo up, and his son clung to him, tears soaking into Julian's shoulder. Mama, Theo sobbed. I know you want Mama. Julian bounced gently, rubbing circles on Theo's back. But Mama asked me to take care of you tonight, and I promised I would keep you safe. Theo cried harder. Julian remembered Ivy's words. If he wakes up scared, you sing to him. He'd never been a singer, couldn't carry a tune to save his life, but he started singing anyway, soft, off-key, a lullaby his mother had sung to him decades ago. Hush, little baby. Don't say a word, Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Theo's sobs quieted to hiccups. And if that mockingbird won't sing, Papa's gonna buy you a diamond ring. By the time Julian got to the part about the looking glass, Theo was asleep again. Julian kept singing anyway, swaying in the dark hotel room, his voice rough but steady. When he finally laid Theo back down, he stayed close, his hand on his son's chest, feeling each breath. His phone lit up with a text from Ivy. Everything okay? I heard crying through the baby monitor app. Baby monitor app, right. She'd probably been watching this whole time. He woke up missing you. I sang. He went back to sleep. You sang? Badly. But it worked. Julian, thank you for all of this. I'm his father. This is what fathers do, not all of them. Julian looked at Theo. This miracle, this second chance, this piece of him he'd never known was missing. I'm not like other fathers. I'm his. And I'm not going anywhere. He meant it. Every word. Morning would bring new challenges. Ivy's sister's wedding, conversations about the future, decisions that would reshape all their lives. But tonight, in this quiet hotel room, with his son sleeping peacefully beside him, Julian Mercer finally understood what he'd been building his empire for. Not success, not legacy, family, and he'd tear down everything he'd built with his bare hands before he lost this again. Julian woke to small fingers prying open his eyelid. Ju! Up! Sunlight streamed through the windows. Theo was standing on the bed, somehow having escaped the pillow fortress, bouncing with the limitless energy of toddlers who'd slept peacefully while their caregivers had not. Julian checked his phone. 6:47. He'd gotten maybe 4 hours of sleep. Total. Good morning to you too, he muttered, catching Theo before he could launch himself off the bed. His son giggled, grabbing Julian's face with both hands. Hungry? Of course you are. Room service arrived 20 minutes later. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and more whole milk. The server's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Julian Mercer, billionaire hotelier, sitting cross-legged on the floor in wrinkled clothes with a toddler in his lap, but said nothing. Julian tipped him $200 anyway. Theo ate with the same enthusiasm he did everything, messily, joyfully, getting eggs in his hair. Julian's phone buzzed. Ivy. Good morning. How did he sleep after midnight? Like an angel. How's your sister? Better. Still panicking about the wedding. Can I come get Theo around 9? I need to help her get ready. Julian looked at his son, who was now trying to feed eggs to the stuffed elephant. What if we came to you instead? I could help with wedding setup. Keep Theo entertained so you can focus on your sister. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Julian, you don't have to. I want to. Tell me where to be. She sent an address. A small events venue near the waterfront. At 8:30, Julian had Theo dressed in the only clean outfit left in the diaper bag, khaki shorts and a polo shirt that made him look impossibly grown up. Handsome boy, Julian told him, and Theo beamed. They took a taxi to the venue, Theo sitting on Julian's lap, pointing out every car and bird and person they passed with running commentary. Only he understood. The Charleston Rose Garden was elegant in its simplicity. White chairs arranged in rows facing an arbor draped with flowers, reception tables set up under a canvas tent, everything decorated in soft pinks and creams. Julian found Ivy inside, surrounded by chaos. She was wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun, arguing with a florist about centerpiece height, while simultaneously texting someone and trying to calm down a crying woman in a wheelchair. Her sister, Julian assumed. The hydrangeas need to be lower, Ivy was saying. People need to see across the table during dinner. Mama! Theo shouted, squirming in Julian's arms. Ivy spun around and her face transformed. Theo, baby. She rushed over, taking him and covering his face with kisses. I missed you so much. Missed Mama. Theo agreed, wrapping his arms around her neck. Then Ivy looked at Julian, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. You look exhausted. I'm fine. Liar. But she was smiling. Thank you. For last night. For bringing him here. For, her voice caught slightly, for being here. The woman in the wheelchair cleared her throat. Not to interrupt this moment, but we have a crisis. The guitarist called in sick, the photographer is stuck in traffic, and I can't even hold my own bouquet with this cast. Ivy's moment of softness evaporated. Chloe, I'll figure it out. I can help, Julian said. Both women turned to him. I own this venue, he continued. Well, my company does. We acquired it last year. I know the manager, the staff, and I have resources. He pulled out his phone. What do you need? 3 hours later, the wedding was somehow coming together. Julian had called in favors, a guitarist from the hotel bar, a photographer friend of a business associate, extra staff to handle setup. He'd negotiated, problem solved, and thrown money at problems until they disappeared. It was what he did best. But what surprised him was how much he enjoyed it. Not the deal-making, but the purpose behind it. Helping Ivy, making her sister's day perfect, being useful to people who mattered. Theo had been passed between family members all morning, charming everyone with his smile and his uncanny ability to say the exact wrong thing at the exact right moment. Aunt Chloe broke, he'd announced to the horrified mother of the groom. Now at 2 p.m, the guests were beginning to arrive. Julian had retreated to a corner of the tent with Theo, giving Ivy space to breathe. Jew, down, Theo demanded. Julian set him on his feet, and his son immediately toddled toward the dance floor, fascinated by his reflection in the polished surface. He looks like you. Julian turned to find a woman in her early 30s standing beside him. Same honey brown eyes as Ivy, similar bone structure. The bride, clearly, cast and all. Chloe, he said, extending his hand. Julian Mercer. I know who you are. She didn't shake his hand, just studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Ivy told me. About you. About Theo. I imagine she has a lot to say. She does. Chloe crossed her arms, awkward with the cast. Most of it isn't great. Julian absorbed that. I deserve that. Yeah, you do. But her expression softened slightly. Though watching you reorganize my entire wedding in 3 hours suggests you're trying to make up for it. I'm trying to help. Why? The question was simple but loaded. Julian watched Theo spinning in circles on the dance floor, dizzy and delighted. Because he's my son and she's... He hesitated. She's important to me. Important, Chloe repeated. That's a diplomatic word. It's the only word I'm sure of right now. Chloe was quiet for a moment. She was devastated when you guys broke up. Moved in with me, cried for weeks, barely ate. Then she found out about the pregnancy, and I watched her pull herself together because she didn't have a choice. She had to be strong for him. She nodded toward Theo. Do you know what that kind of strength costs? I'm beginning to understand. Good. Chloe's eyes were fierce. Because if you hurt her again, if you hurt either of them, I don't care how many hotels you own. I will make your life hell. Noted. Chloe, Ivy appeared, looking frazzled. You need to get changed. The ceremony starts in an hour. Going. Chloe shot Julian one last warning look, then headed toward the bridal suite. Ivy watched her go, then turned to Julian. What did she say to you? That I'm on probation. That sounds like Chloe. Ivy looked around the transformed venue, her eyes welling up. Julian, you saved the day. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have just dropped Theo off and left. Instead, she gestured helplessly at everything. You did all this. Why? Because I love you, Julian thought. Because I never stopped loving you. Because standing here helping with centerpieces and photographer drama is the most meaningful thing I've done in 2 years. But he didn't say any of that. Because you needed help, he said instead. And I wanted to be the one who helped. Ivy stared at him, and Julian saw the exact moment her walls started to crack. Not collapse. She was too smart, too hurt, too careful for that. But crack. Just enough to let a little light in. You should stay, she said quietly, for the wedding. Theo loves you already, and you're good with him. Better than I expected. I'd like that. But Julian, she stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and familiar. This doesn't fix everything. You being here today doesn't erase 17 months of absence. I know, and I'm still terrified that you're going to realize this is harder than you thought and disappear. I won't. You don't know that. Yes, Julian said. I do. Before she could respond, Theo came running over, crashing into Ivy's legs. Mama! Dance! He grabbed both their hands, trying to pull them toward the dance floor. Ivy laughed, the sound breaking the tension. The wedding hasn't started yet, baby. No dancing until after the ceremony. Now, Theo insisted. Julian knelt down to Theo's level. Tell you what, after the wedding, I'll dance with you and Mama. Deal? Deal! Theo shouted, though he clearly had no idea what that meant. The ceremony was beautiful. Julian sat in the back row, Theo on his lap, watching Ivy stand beside her sister at the altar. She'd changed into a soft lavender dress, her hair down in waves, and when she smiled at Chloe's obvious joy, Julian felt something in his chest shift and settle. This was what he'd been missing. Not just Theo, not just the relationship, but this, community, family, being part of something bigger than quarterly earnings and acquisition deals. Theo fell asleep during the vows, his head heavy on Julian's shoulder. At the reception, Julian found himself pulled into conversations with Ivy's family, aunts and uncles and cousins who all seemed to know about him in vague terms. The ex-boyfriend, the one who got away, the father who'd just appeared. They were polite but wary, protective of Ivy in ways that made Julian respect them, even as it reminded him how much he'd lost. But when the dancing started and Theo woke up demanding to be part of it, Julian kept his promise. He took Theo's small hands and spun him around to a Taylor Swift song, his son giggling uncontrollably, and when he looked up, Ivy was watching them with an expression that made Julian's heart stop. She crossed the dance floor and held out her hand. Can I cut in? Julian transferred Theo to Ivy's arms, and she swayed with their son, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh. Then she looked at Julian. Dance with us? It wasn't a slow song. It was upbeat and cheerful and completely wrong for the moment happening between them. But Julian stepped closer, his hand finding the small of Ivy's back. Theo sandwiched between them, and they moved together, awkward and perfect and terrifying. He kept asking for you last night, Julian said over the music. Even after I got him back to sleep, every time he woke up the first word was, Mama. What did you do? Sang to him. Badly. But it worked. Ivy's eyes were bright. You hate singing. I'd do a lot of things I hate for him. Julian, I know it's not enough, he interrupted. I know I can't make up for lost time with grand gestures and problem solving. But I'm trying, Ivy. I'm trying to be what he needs. What you both need. And what do you think we need? The question hung between them, heavy with years of hurt and hope and possibility. Someone who shows up, Julian said quietly, every day. Not just for the easy moments. Someone who stays. Can you be that person? I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I can be. Theo chose that moment to grab both their faces, smooshing them together. Kiss, he demanded. They both laughed, the tension breaking. Bossy, Ivy told their son. Just like your father. Just like his mother, Julian corrected. The song ended. Another began. They kept swaying. And for the first time since that flight, since discovering his whole world had shifted, Julian felt like maybe, just maybe, the pieces could fit back together. Different than before. Complicated and messy and uncertain, but real and worth fighting for. The wedding wound down around midnight. Theo had fallen asleep on Julian's shoulder hours ago, dead weight and warm breath, oblivious to the music and laughter around them. Ivy found them in a quiet corner of the tent, Julian swaying slightly even though no song was playing, his hand protective on Theo's back. He's out cold, she whispered. Has been for an hour. Didn't want to disturb him. Something in her expression softened. You're a natural at this. Don't let one good day fool you. I'm terrified 90% of the time. That's called being a parent. She reached out, brushing a curl off Theo's forehead. Chloe and David are leaving soon. I should say goodbye. Can you? I've got him. Ivy hesitated, then did something that surprised them both. She stood on her toes and pressed a kiss to Julian's cheek. Thank you for everything today. She was gone before he could respond, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the ghost of her lips against his skin. Julian sat with Theo until Ivy returned, her eyes red-rimmed in a way that suggested she'd been crying happy tears with her sister. Ready to go? She asked. Where are we going? Back to the hotel, I assumed. Julian stood carefully, Theo still sleeping against him. Come back to the Charleston Grand, both of you. It's closer, and the suite has 2 bedrooms. Theo can have the second room, and you can actually get some sleep instead of driving across town. Julian, it's practical, he interrupted. Nothing more. You're exhausted. I have the space, and I'm not ready to say goodbye to him yet. The last admission slipped out before he could stop it. Ivy studied him in the dim light, weighing something. Then she nodded. Okay, but just for tonight. The taxi ride back was quiet. Ivy sat close to Julian, their shoulders touching. Theo sprawled across both their laps. It felt domestic in a way that made Julian's chest ache, like a glimpse of something that could have been, might still be. Back at the suite, Ivy changed Theo into pajamas while Julian ordered room service. Tea for Ivy, coffee for himself, even though it was nearly 1 a.m. When she emerged from the bedroom, Theo was asleep in the king-sized bed, surrounded by pillows. He looked so small in that huge bed, she said, smiling. He does? Julian handed her the tea. You should sleep too. I'm too wired. Ivy curled up on the couch, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Today was insane. Good insane, but insane. Julian sat across from her, maintaining distance. Your sister seems happy. She is, even with a broken arm. Ivy took a sip. She threatened you, didn't she? Thoroughly. Sorry about that. Don't be. I respect it. She's protecting you. I can protect myself. I know, but it's nice that you don't have to do it alone. Ivy looked at him over the rim of her cup. Is that what you want to be? Someone who protects us? I want to be someone you can count on. Those aren't always the same thing. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then tell me what you need. Not what you think I want to hear. What do you actually need from me? Ivy was quiet for a long moment, staring into her tea like it held answers. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Consistency. I need to know that if Theo has a doctor's appointment on Tuesday, you'll be there. Not flying to Singapore or closing some deal in London. Actually there, physically present. Okay. I need you to understand that he's not always going to be this easy. He's going to have tantrums and terrible twos and be difficult and exhausting. I'm prepared for that. Are you? Ivy set down her cup, her eyes intense. Because everyone loves the cute moments. The first steps, the giggles, the bedtime cuddles. But parenting is also the stomach flu at 3 a.m. and cleaning up accidents and saying no 1,000 times a day, even when it breaks your heart. I want all of it, Ivy. The beautiful and the ugly. You say that now. I mean it now. And I'll keep meaning it. Julian moved to the couch beside her, close but not touching. I'm not going to pretend I understand what you went through raising him alone. I can't. But I can promise that from this moment forward, you won't be alone anymore. Not if you let me in. Ivy's eyes were wet. I'm scared. Of what? Of believing you. Of letting Theo get attached only to have you realize this isn't the life you wanted and disappear. That won't happen. You don't know that. 6 months ago, you didn't even know he existed. What if this is just guilt? Or novelty? What happens when the reality of co-parenting sets in and it's complicated and messy and not some romantic redemption story? Julian took her hand. The first time he'd really touched her since the plane. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. Look at me, he said. She did. I love him, Julian said, the words coming easier than he expected. I've known him for 3 days and I love him with everything I am. That's not guilt. That's not novelty. That's biology and choice and fate or whatever you want to call it. He's my son and nothing. Not distance, not difficulty. Not the messiness you're describing. We'll change that. And me? The question was barely audible. Where do I fit in this? Julian's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. You're his mother. You're the woman who raised an incredible child alone. He paused, gathering courage. You're the woman I never got over. Ivy's breath hitched. Julian, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I know I don't deserve that, but I need you to know that when I look at you with him, when I watch you be his mother, I see everything I've been missing. Not just him, you. A tear slipped down her cheek. This is too fast. I know. We can't just pick up where we left off. I know that too. Then what are you saying? Julian took a breath, choosing his words carefully. I'm saying I want to try. Not to recreate what we had, but to build something new, something that includes him, puts him first, but also acknowledges what's still between us. What if there's nothing between us anymore? What if it's just nostalgia and shared DNA? Do you really believe that? Ivy pulled her hand away, standing and pacing to the window. The Charleston skyline glittered below them, city lights reflecting off the harbor. I don't know what I believe, she said finally. 2 years ago, you were everything to me. Losing you nearly destroyed me. And now you're here saying all the right things, being perfect with our son, and I want so badly to believe this is real. Julian stood, moving to stand behind her, close enough to feel her warmth but not touching. It is real. How can you be sure? Because I'm standing here at 1 a.m. having the scariest conversation of my life, instead of running away like I would have 2 years ago. He paused. I've changed, Ivy. Maybe not enough. Maybe not in all the ways that matter. But knowing about Theo, seeing you again, it's like waking up from a dream I didn't realize I was having. She turned to face him, and they were suddenly too close, the air between them charged. I need time, she whispered. You can have all the time you need. And I need to see that you mean this. Not just promises, Julian. Actions. Showing up. Being there when it's inconvenient and hard. I will be. Prove it. She stepped back, creating space. We're flying back to Charlotte tomorrow afternoon. Come with us. Not to my apartment, but to Charlotte. Find a place to stay. Be present for a week, 2 weeks, however long it takes to show me this isn't just a weekend fantasy. Julian didn't hesitate. Okay. Okay? She looked surprised. Just like that? What about your work? Your hotels? The Singapore expansion? I'll handle it. I can work remotely. My team is capable. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my assistant right now, clearing my schedule for the next month. Julian, that's crazy. No, what's crazy is that I almost lost you both because I put work first. I won't make that mistake again. He dialed, and despite the late hour, his assistant answered on the second ring. Marcus, I need you to clear my calendar for the next 4 weeks. Reschedule everything, delegate what you can, push the rest. And find me a furnished apartment or extended stay hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina. Something nice but not flashy, family-friendly. Marcus, to his credit, only paused for a beat. Understood. Should I inform the board? Tell them I'm taking personal time. Family emergency. Is everything all right, sir? Julian looked at Ivy, whose hand was covering her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Everything's about to be, he said. I'll send details in the morning. He hung up. Ivy was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. You just cleared your entire schedule? Yes. For a month, yes. To stay in Charlotte, to be with my son, and to prove to you that I'm serious. This is insane. You run a billion-dollar company, which will survive without me micromanaging for a few weeks. This is more important. She shook her head, laughing slightly, the sound caught between disbelief and something that might have been hope. You're really going to do this? I really am. Ivy looked at him for a long moment, and Julian saw the walls crack a little wider, saw the possibility of trust beginning to take root. Okay, she said finally. Okay, but Julian, if you do this, if you really move to Charlotte and disrupt your entire life, and then you decide it's too much and leave, it won't just be me you hurt. It'll be him. I understand. Do you? Because he's already starting to love you. I can see it. And if you break his heart, her voice cracked, I will never forgive you. Julian crossed to her, taking both her hands. I won't break his heart. Or yours. Not again. That's a big promise. I know, and I intend to keep it. They stood there, hands clasped, the weight of the moment pressing down. Then Ivy pulled away gently. I should sleep. It's late, and Theo will be up early. Take the bedroom. I'll sleep out here. Julian, please. You both need the bed more than I do. She nodded, exhaustion finally showing in the slump of her shoulders. At the bedroom door, she paused. For what it's worth, she said softly, I'm glad you were on that plane. So am I. She disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door with a quiet click. Julian stood alone in the suite, looking out at Charleston's sleeping city, and felt the magnitude of what he'd just committed to. 4 weeks in Charlotte. Away from his empire, his carefully constructed life, everything familiar. But as he thought about Theo's laugh and Ivy's cautious hope and the possibility of becoming the man they deserved, Julian realized something fundamental. He'd spent 17 years building hotels. Now it was time to build a home, and he'd never been more terrified, or more certain. Charlotte welcomed Julian with humidity and traffic and the kind of ordinary chaos he'd forgotten existed outside boardrooms and five-star hotels. Marcus had found him a furnished townhouse in Dilworth, a tree-lined neighborhood 15 minutes from Ivy's apartment. It was nice, but not extravagant. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, the kind of place where families lived normal lives. Julian had never lived anywhere normal. The first week was an adjustment. He showed up at Ivy's apartment every morning at 7:30, bringing coffee and whatever breakfast Theo was currently obsessed with. This week, it was blueberry muffins. He'd stay until Ivy left for her evening classes at 9, helping with meals and playtime and the million small crises that seemed to define life with a toddler. Theo spilled an entire cup of juice on Julian's laptop. Julian bought a new laptop in sippy cups with better lids. Theo decided he hated all vegetables. Julian learned to hide pureed carrots in mac and cheese. Theo woke up with a fever at 2 a.m. Julian drove across town in his pajamas, sat with Ivy in the emergency room for 5 hours, and held Theo while they took his temperature over and over again until the fever broke, and it turned out to be just a virus. "You didn't have to come," Ivy had said, exhausted and grateful, sitting beside him in the waiting room. "Yes, I did." By week 2, he had a routine. Mornings at Ivy's apartment. Afternoons at a coffee shop working remotely. Video calls with his executives in Tokyo and London and Paris. Evenings back with Theo, reading books and playing blocks and learning that his son's favorite game was throw everything and make daddy pick it up. His team was handling things. The Singapore deal was progressing. The Miami property renovation was on schedule. His empire hadn't collapsed without him. That realization was both liberating and terrifying. On a Thursday afternoon, 2.5 weeks into his Charlotte experiment, Julian's phone rang. "Christopher, how's domestic life treating you?" his brother asked. "It's exhausting and perfect, and nothing like I expected. That's parenting." Christopher paused. "Mom wants to meet Theo. She's been calling me daily asking when you're bringing them to Boston." Julian rubbed his temples. His mother. He'd been avoiding that particular complication. "It's too soon." "Is it? Or are you afraid she's going to say something that ruins this fragile peace you've built with Ivy?" "Both. Fair enough." Christopher laughed. "But you can't avoid her forever. And Julian, she's his grandmother. Whatever her faults, she deserves to meet her grandson." After they hung up, Julian sat with the weight of that truth. He mentioned it to Ivy that evening while Theo built a tower of blocks destined to be immediately destroyed. "Your mother wants to meet him?" Ivy's voice was carefully neutral. "She does, but I told her it's too soon. We're still figuring things out. She doesn't like me." It wasn't a question. "She doesn't know you. She knew a version of you from years ago, filtered through my terrible communication skills." Julian moved a block closer to Theo's reaching hand. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is what you're comfortable with." Ivy was quiet, watching Theo knock down his tower with gleeful violence. "She's his grandmother," she said finally. "Eventually he should know her. Both sides of his family. Eventually doesn't have to be now. But maybe it should be." Ivy looked at him. "You're doing everything right, Julian. You're showing up, being present, proving you're serious. But part of being serious means integrating us into your real life, not keeping us separate in this Charlotte bubble." "This isn't a bubble, isn't it? You're in a temporary townhouse working remotely playing house, but eventually you'll have to go back to your actual life, and we need to know if there's room for us there." The observation hit harder than Julian expected. "There's room," he said. "Prove it. Take us to Boston. Let us meet your mother, your brother. See where you come from. Let Theo be part of your world, not just you being part of ours." Julian wanted to argue, wanted to say it was too soon, too risky, too likely to end in Catherine Mercer saying something cutting that would undo weeks of carefully rebuilt trust. But Ivy was right. "Okay," he said. "I'll arrange it." 3 days later, they flew to Boston. Julian had rented a car and booked rooms at a hotel near his mother's Beacon Hill townhouse. Separate rooms, boundaries still firmly in place despite the growing warmth between them. Theo loved the plane ride, pressing his face against the window and announcing clouds to everyone within earshot. An elderly woman across the aisle smiled. "First flight?" "No," Ivy said, but he's still excited every time. Treasure that, the woman said. They grow up so fast. Julian watched Ivy's expression shift, something wistful crossing her face. You okay? He asked quietly. Just thinking about how much he's already grown. 17 months went by so fast. She looked at Julian. You missed so much. I know. I'm sorry for that, for keeping him from you. It was the first time she'd actually apologized. We can't change the past, Julian said, but we're here now. That's what matters. His mother's townhouse was exactly as he remembered. Elegant, intimidating, filled with antiques and family photos that documented generations of Mercers being successful and serious. Catherine answered the door herself, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a cashmere sweater set that probably cost more than Ivy's monthly rent. Julian, she kissed his cheek, then turned to Ivy with an appraising look. Ivy, it's been a long time. Mrs. Mercer, thank you for having us. It's Catherine. We're family now, I suppose. Her eyes dropped to Theo, who was hiding behind Ivy's leg, shy suddenly in the presence of this imposing stranger. And then something remarkable happened. Catherine's entire expression softened. Hello, Theodore. I'm your grandmother. Theo peeked out, curious. Catherine knelt down, actually knelt, something Julian had never seen her do, and held out her hand. Would you like to see something special? I have a music box that your grandfather gave me. It has a little bird that sings. Theo looked at Ivy for permission. She nodded. Slowly, Theo took Catherine's hand. Julian felt something tight in his chest loosen. The afternoon was better than he'd feared. Christopher arrived with his wife Emma and their daughter, and the house filled with the kind of chaos Julian had never associated with the formal Mercer residence. Catherine showed Theo the music box. Christopher taught him to say Uncle Chris. Emma talked to Ivy about teaching and motherhood and made her laugh in a way that suggested genuine connection. But around 4 o'clock, Catherine pulled Julian aside. We need to talk, privately. They went to his father's old study, a room that still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, though his father had been dead for 27 years. She's different than I remember, Catherine said without preamble. People change in 2 years. She's good for you. I can see it. His mother sat in the leather chair behind the desk. You're calmer, more present. You actually smiled at dinner last week when I called. Really smiled. Not that corporate smile you use in negotiations. Ivy and Theo make me happy. I can see that too. Catherine folded her hands. Which is why I'm going to tell you something you won't want to hear. Julian's stomach dropped. What? Vanessa called me. Of all the things Julian expected, that wasn't it. When? 3 days ago. She's hurt, Julian, and angry. She feels blindsided by how quickly you ended things. I was honest with her. Were you? Because from what she told me, you broke up with her, flew to Charlotte the next day, and essentially vanished into a new life. No real explanation, no closure. Guilt twisted in Julian's gut. I didn't owe her. You didn't owe her a relationship, but you did owe her basic human decency. She invested 4 months in you, Julian. She deserves better than being discarded the moment something shinier came along. That's not what happened, isn't it? Catherine's gaze was sharp. You found out about Theo and immediately blew up your life. I understand why, but that doesn't erase the fact that you left a wake of collateral damage. Julian sank into the chair across from her. What did she want? Closure, I think. To understand why she wasn't enough. Catherine paused. She also mentioned she's considering talking to the press. Ice flooded Julian's veins. What? She hasn't decided yet. But think about it from her perspective. Successful businessman suddenly has a secret child and abandons his girlfriend to play house with his ex? That's a story. If she goes to the press, it will be messy. For you, for Ivy, for Theo. The vultures will dig into everything. They'll find out Ivy never told you about the pregnancy. They'll speculate about why. It'll be invasive and horrible and very, very public. Julian's mind raced. I'll call her. Apologize. Whatever it takes to keep this quiet. Will you? Or will you do what you always do, throw money at the problem until it goes away? The accusation stung because it was accurate. What would you have me do? Face the consequences of your choices. You can't just erase 4 months with Vanessa because it's inconvenient. You need to have a real conversation with her. Give her actual closure. And then, Catherine's voice softened. You need to decide if you're ready for what being with Ivy really means. I am ready. Are you? Because it's not just about showing up for a few weeks and playing father. It's about being part of a family that will face scrutiny. About protecting them from the kind of attention that comes with being involved with someone like you. about making hard choices and sacrifices that will cost you. I know that. Do you? Or are you still in the honeymoon phase, where everything feels possible and love conquers all? Julian stood, pacing to the window. Why are you doing this? I thought you'd be happy I'm trying to be a father. I am happy about that. But I'm also your mother, and I know you. You're brilliant and driven and generous. But you're also impulsive when it comes to Ivy. You always have been. And I don't want you to hurt her again by promising things you can't deliver. I won't. Then prove it. Call Vanessa. Have the hard conversation. Clean up your mess properly instead of running away from it. Because if you can't handle that, how will you handle the much harder conversations that come with co-parenting and rebuilding trust? Before Julian could respond, the study door burst open. Ivy stood there, her face pale. Julian, we need to go. Now. What's wrong? I just got a call from my landlord. There's been a fire at my apartment building. Her voice broke. Everything we own is gone. The world tilted. Julian was moving before he could think, grabbing his coat, his keys, already mentally cataloging what needed to happen next. But as they rushed out to the car, Theo crying because everyone was upset and he didn't understand why, Julian felt the weight of his mother's words. This was the test, not the easy moments of playing in parks and bedtime stories. This, crisis, chaos, real life crashing in when everything had just started to feel stable. And as they drove to the airport, Ivy pale and shaking beside him, Theo confused and scared in the back seat, Julian realized something that terrified him. He had no idea if he was strong enough for this, but he was going to find out. The apartment building was still smoldering when they arrived back in Charlotte. Fire trucks lined the street, their lights painting everything in harsh reds and blues. Yellow tape cordoned off the entrance. Neighbors stood in clusters, some crying, others just staring at what used to be their homes. Ivy got out of the car like she was moving through water, her eyes fixed on the blackened windows of her third-floor unit. Everything, she whispered. Theo's baby photos, my grandmother's jewelry, all of it. Julian wanted to fix it, to throw money at the problem until it disappeared. But some things couldn't be fixed with a checkbook. He unbuckled Theo from his car seat. His son was finally asleep after crying himself into exhaustion on the plane. Come on, Julian said gently. Let's go to my townhouse. You both need rest. I need to talk to the fire marshal, find out what happened, see if anything. Tomorrow, Julian interrupted. Tonight you need to breathe. Ivy looked at him, and something in her expression cracked. I don't have anything, Julian. No clothes, no laptop for work, no toys for Theo. The insurance will cover some of it eventually, but right now, her voice broke. I have nothing. You have me. The words hung between them. Ivy laughed, but it came out bitter. Do I? Because your mother just spent an hour telling you all the ways I'm complicated and difficult and probably not worth the trouble. She didn't say that. She didn't have to. I saw it in her face. The way she looked at me when we first arrived. Like I was the woman who trapped her son with an unexpected baby. That's not what she thinks. Isn't it? Ivy wiped her eyes angrily. And maybe she's right. Maybe this is all too hard. You have Vanessa threatening to go to the press, your mother questioning your choices, and now I'm literally homeless with a toddler. This isn't what you signed up for. Julian shifted Theo to one arm and took Ivy's hand with the other. This is exactly what I signed up for. All of it. The complicated and the messy and the impossible. Julian, no, listen to me. He pulled her closer, forcing her to meet his eyes. You think this fire changes things? It doesn't. You think my mother's opinion or Vanessa's hurt feelings or any of it makes me want this less? It doesn't. How can you say that? Your life was perfect before that plane ride. My life was empty. The words came out louder than Julian intended. A firefighter glanced over. Julian lowered his voice but kept the intensity. I had money and success and every material thing I could want. And I was miserable, going through motions, pretending the hole you left when we broke up had somehow closed. Ivy was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Then I saw you on that plane, Julian continued, with our son, and everything I'd convinced myself was enough. The hotels, the deals, the carefully constructed life, all of it revealed itself for what it was. A distraction from the fact that I'd lost the only thing that actually mattered. You can't mean that. I love you. The confession came out raw, desperate. I never stopped loving you, Ivy, and I know it's too soon to say it. I know you're not ready to hear it. But I can't keep pretending this is just about Theo. It's about you. It's always been about you. Ivy covered her mouth with her hand, her whole body shaking. You don't have to say it back, Julian said quickly. I'm not asking for that. I need you to know. So when you're making decisions about where to live and whether to let me in and if I'm worth the risk, you know where I stand. For a long moment, they stood there on the street, fire trucks idling behind them, Theo sleeping between them, the wreckage of Ivy's old life smoking in the background. Then Ivy stepped forward and kissed him. It was desperate and salty with tears and tasted like smoke and grief and hope all mixed together. Julian's free arm went around her waist, pulling her closer, and for the first time in 2 years everything felt right. When they pulled apart, Ivy was laughing and crying simultaneously. "You're insane," she said. "Absolutely insane. Probably. You just told me you love me in front of a burning building. Not my most romantic moment." "Actually," Ivy cupped his face. "It kind of was." Julian's heart stopped. "Ivy, I'm not ready to say it back. Not yet. Too much has happened too fast and I need to trust this is real." She kissed him again, softer. "But I want to. God, Julian, I want to believe this is real so badly it scares me. It's real. Then prove it. Not with grand gestures or clearing your schedule or buying things to replace what burned. Prove it by staying. Through the boring parts and the hard parts and the moments when I'm difficult and scared. I will. Promise me." Her eyes were fierce. "Promise me that when this gets hard, and it will get hard, you won't run." Julian shifted Theo so he could take both of Ivy's hands. "I promise. On everything I am and everything I have. I'm not running. Not from you, not from him, not from this. Whatever this becomes." Ivy nodded, squeezing his hands. "Okay, okay." They drove to Julian's townhouse in silence. Theo still sleeping, the enormity of the day finally catching up with all of them. Inside, Julian laid Theo on the couch and covered him with a blanket. Ivy stood in the middle of the living room looking lost. "I don't have pajamas for him," she said, "or clothes for tomorrow, or his elephant. He's going to wake up and ask for his elephant and it's gone, everything is gone. We'll get new things. It won't be the same." "No," Julian agreed. "It won't, but it'll be ours. We'll build new memories." His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Vanessa's publicist contacted me. She's scheduled a press conference for Monday, wanted to give you a heads up." Julian stared at the message, his stomach sinking. Ivy saw his expression. "What?" "Vanessa's going public. Monday." "With what?" "Everything. The breakup. Theo. All of it." Ivy went pale. "Julian, if she tells the press about us, about how I didn't tell you, they'll destroy me. They'll make me look like... I won't let that happen. How can you stop it?" Julian was already dialing. The phone rang twice before Vanessa answered. "Julian." Her voice was cold. "We need to talk. In person. There's nothing to talk about. Please. Give me 1 hour. Hear me out. If you still want to go to the press after, I won't stop you. But you deserve the full story first." Silence stretched out. "Fine. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. The hotel where we were supposed to spend that weekend. Thank you. Don't thank me yet." She hung up. Ivy was watching him. "What are you going to tell her?" "The truth. All of it. And then I'm going to ask her not to destroy the family I'm trying to build. If she still wants to go public after that." Julian shrugged. "Then at least I tried. You shouldn't have to beg your ex-girlfriend not to ruin your life." "I'm not begging. I'm taking responsibility for the mess I made." He pulled Ivy into his arms. "I hurt her. She deserves closure. And if me giving her that means protecting you and Theo from media scrutiny, then that's what I'll do." Ivy buried her face in his chest. "When did you become this person?" "What person?" "Someone who puts others first." "About 3 weeks ago, on a plane." He kissed the top of her head. "Best flight of my life." They stood like that until Theo stirred, making sleepy sounds. Ivy went to him immediately, scooping him up. "Hey baby, we're at Julian's house, it's okay." "Mama?" Theo rubbed his eyes. "Where Fant?" Ivy's face crumpled. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Elephant got lost. But we'll find you a new one, okay?" "No." Theo's face scrunched up, ready to cry. "Want my Fant?" Julian knelt beside them. "Hey, buddy. I know you want your elephant. And I know it feels really bad that he's not here. But you know what? Tomorrow, we're going to go find the best elephant in the whole world. Even better than your old one." "No better." Theo was crying now. "Want old one?" I know you do." Julian looked at Ivy, saw his own helplessness reflected in her eyes. This was a pain they couldn't fix with promises or new toys. So Julian did the only thing he could think of. He started singing. "Hush, little baby. Don't you cry. Papa's gonna sing you a lullaby." Theo's sobs quieted to hiccups. Ivy joined in, her voice soft and surprisingly lovely. And if that lullaby won't do, Papa's gonna buy you something new. They made up verses, ridiculous and off-key, until Theo was giggling instead of crying. And in that moment, standing in Julian's townhouse with a traumatized toddler and a homeless woman and tomorrow's crisis looming, Julian felt something click into place. This was his family, imperfect and complicated and built on the ruins of what came before, but real and worth everything. 18 months later, the house in Charleston's Garden District had taken 6 months to renovate. Julian had bought it 3 weeks after the fire, a historic property with good bones but terrible plumbing, peeling paint, and a backyard that was more weeds than grass. Ivy had called him crazy. His mother had called it impractical. His contractors had called it a nightmare. But now, standing on the back porch watching Theo chase fireflies in the garden, Julian knew it was perfect. "Daddy, Daddy, look!" Theo ran over, his hands cupped carefully. At 2 years and 11 months, he was all gangly limbs and endless questions. "I got one." Julian knelt down, peering into the small hands. "That's amazing, buddy. Now let him go so he can find his family." Theo opened his hands, and the firefly escaped, blinking into the twilight. "Like when you found us," Theo said matter-of-factly, then ran off to chase another. Julian's throat tightened. Out of the mouths of toddlers. The screen door creaked. Ivy stepped out carrying 2 glasses of iced tea, her hair pulled back, wearing one of Julian's old college t-shirts and cut-off shorts. She was barefoot, relaxed in a way she hadn't been 18 months ago. "He's going to be filthy," she observed, settling into the porch swing beside Julian. "That's what baths are for. You're giving him the bath tonight. He got mud in his hair yesterday and I'm still finding it." "Deal." Julian put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him naturally the way she did now, like it was easy, like they'd never been apart. It hadn't been easy, of course. The meeting with Vanessa had been brutal. She'd cried, accused, demanded to know why Ivy was worth destroying what they'd had. Julian had sat through it all, apologizing sincerely, explaining honestly, and ultimately asking her to think about what going public would actually accomplish. "Will it make you feel better?" he'd asked, "or will it just hurt people who are already struggling?" In the end, she'd canceled the press conference. Not out of forgiveness, she'd made that clear, but because she'd looked at the photos he'd shown her of Theo and said, "He didn't ask for any of this. He deserves privacy." Julian had thanked her. She'd left without saying goodbye. 6 months later, he'd heard she was dating a venture capitalist from Seattle. He'd sent a bottle of expensive wine with a note. "I hope you find everything you deserve." She'd sent back a 1-line email. "I hope you appreciate what you have." He did. Every single day. Christopher called, Ivy said, pulling Julian back to the present. "He and Emma want to bring the kids down next month, make it a beach weekend." "That sounds good. Theo would love seeing his cousins." "Your mom wants to come too." Julian tensed slightly. His relationship with Catherine had improved, but it was still complicated. She'd apologized for the things she'd said in Boston, had even admitted she'd been wrong about Ivy. But mothers and sons carried their own complex histories. "What did you tell her?" Julian asked. "That she's welcome anytime. She's Theo's grandmother." Ivy paused. "She sent him another package yesterday. 3 more books and a stuffed elephant." Julian laughed. Catherine had been trying to replace Theo's lost elephant for months. They now had 7 elephants of various sizes living in Theo's room. "She's trying." "She is." Ivy took a sip of her tea. "We all are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Theo discover a particularly bright firefly. "I have something to tell you," Ivy said eventually. Julian's heart skipped. Her tone was carefully neutral, which usually meant something big. "Okay. The college offered me a full-time position. Tenure track. It would mean better pay, job security, actual benefits." "That's amazing. Ivy, that's—" "Wait." He studied her face. "Why don't you look happy?" "Because it would also mean night classes 3 times a week, weekend seminars once a month, less time with Theo." She turned to face Julian. "Less time with you. You should take it. Just like that. Just like that. This is your career, your dream. We'll figure out the logistics. I work from home now anyway. You run a billion-dollar company from our dining room table, you mean?" Julian had restructured his entire business model after the fire, promoted executives, delegated operations, set up systems that didn't require him to personally approve every decision. He still traveled occasionally, quarterly board meetings, annual investor presentations, but he was home most days by the time Theo woke up. The company is fine. Better than fine. Turns out micromanaging everything wasn't actually necessary. Julian took Ivy's hand. Take the job. Build your career. I've got Theo. You're sure? I'm sure. Ivy kissed him. Soft and sweet. Have I told you lately that I love you? Not since this morning. Well, I do. Desperately. Inconveniently. Completely. Julian pulled her closer. Inconveniently. You reorganized my entire life, Julian Mercer. Made me fall in love with you all over again. Gave me this house and stability and a partner who actually shows up. Very inconvenient. I'm the worst. The absolute worst. But she was smiling. Theo came running back, grass-stained and sweaty and glowing with happiness. Story time? Julian checked his watch. 7:30. Right on schedule. Theo was nothing if not consistent about his routines. Bath first, then story. 2 stories. Nice try. 1 story. 3 stories. Ivy laughed. He's definitely your son. Everything's a negotiation. 2 stories, Julian conceded. But only if you get in the bath without arguing. Deal. Theo held out his hand for a shake, something Julian had taught him during a particularly long discussion about bedtime. As they headed inside, Theo chattering about fireflies and elephants and whatever 3-year-olds thought about, Julian felt that familiar sense of rightness. This was what mattered, not the hotels or the money or the empire he'd built. This. Family dinners and bedtime negotiations and a woman who'd given him a second chance he hadn't deserved. Later, after Theo was asleep and they were curled up together on the couch, Ivy said quietly, "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "Giving up so much. Your old life. The freedom. You used to fly to Paris on a whim. Now you're planning your schedule around preschool drop-off times." Julian thought about it seriously, about the man he'd been on that plane 3 years ago. Successful, lonely, convinced he had everything figured out. "Not even for a second," he said finally. That life was empty. This one, he gestured around the living room,